everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. We have springtime fishing happening pretty much across the country right now. Even up in my neck of the woods, most of the lakes are ice free. You've got a lot of bass that are starting to move shallow to think about the spawn. If you live down south, the fish have been spawning for a while, so you've got a lot of fish that are up shallow. One of my favorite times to fish. Generally, the weather's really nice. A lot of times you have really good fishing because there's a lot of fish up. A lot of times it's shallow water, kind of bank beating type fishing. And you still have a really good shot at a big female bass that's in up staging around the spawn. So, from that standpoint, I love this time of year. I think it's one of the best times to be fishing. And with that, I think you can really concentrate on a lot of shallow water fishing. So, I wanted to share with you my specific go to springtime baits when you've got a bunch of fish that are up shallow. These are baits that are just tried and proven to work pretty much across the country for all the different species of bass. I've had a lot of really good luck and won a lot of money on these baits. So I'm just going to go down them. I'm going to give you the exact bait, the color, kind of where I like to throw it. And really this is just all about like my favorite go-to baits. Doesn't mean you can't throw a different color, doesn't mean you can't choose different baits. These are just the ones that I will have tied on for pretty much every springtime tournament. Okay, so let's start with this guy right here. I've talked about him quite a bit on the channel. This is a Berkley spin rocket. It's a prop bait that just has something different about it. It generates a ton of strikes. You can fish it pretty much anywhere around cover. That's how I like to fish it. I'm not a big fan of throwing a topwater prop bait just in big flat areas covering a lot of water like you throw a lot of moving topwater baits. I like to throw this bait around the objects that I think the fish are either spawning around or that they're holding next to, waiting to move up onto the beds. So generally you're talking about maybe an overhanging tree, a dock, a bush, a clump of weeds, a clump of pads. I really throw it, fish the target, and that's about it. So maybe I work the bait 5 or 10 feet, reel it in, make another cast, a bunch of just, hard twitches, let the bait sit, twitch it, let it sit. And if there's a fish around, generally they will at least show themselves. So meaning a lot of times you get a lot of swirls under the bait. So if they don't actually hit the bait, they still show themselves as to where they're at. If that happens, then you move to this guy. Just your straight wacky rig. This is the Berkley Maxent 5-inch green pumpkin color. This is one of my favorites. It's actually green pumpkin black tip. I don't think you can get this anywhere other than the Berkley website right now, but green pumpkin generally is fine. A lot of times I'll also dip the tail in chartreuse. I do feel like that can help in the springtime period. But a wacky rig is just a phenomenal bait to throw at those fish that show themselves on your topwater bait, or just to still throw in those areas where you think the fish might be bedding. Skip it further back under a dock, under those lay down trees, into holes in the grass, that type of thing. But a weightless wacky rig is a phenomenal bait to throw, and it's one you gotta have tied on. After that, another bait that I really like to fish. This is a little bit more dependent on the lake that you have, but if you do have a lake that's got some rock in it, I love to throw a little tungsten jig. This is the Tungsten Casting Jig, just one of my favorite go-tos. So if I'm fishing around any sort of transition zone, so it could be a channel swing bank, could be a rock transition, it could be a seawall, it could be if you've got like a riprap bank that's you have like say a channel complex, a dredge channel complex. A lot of times you have riprap banks. I like to throw a jig around some of that riprap. These are really baits that are going to catch either fish that are on the bed. They're going to be fish that are transitioning around some of those transition zones, like I was saying, a seawall, or if you're going down a rock bank, or if you've got some isolated lay down trees where maybe you don't want to throw a wacky rig into it because it's a little thick. That's where you pick up the little jig and throw it in those areas. Now, I tend to like to go with a small jig this time of year because a lot of times if the fish is on a bed, they'll pick it up by the tail and carry it out. So a smaller jig allows them to get the bait in their mouth. You get better hookups, I feel like. So I always have a small jig. Some other ones that are really good. I like the Tungsten Little Spotty by Picasso. Strike King's got their Bitsy Bug. The Bitsy Flip is the one that I actually prefer. You're talking about your little ones. The Tightrope Firework Jig is another really good one. Any of your small little jigs that tend to agitate the fish on bed, but at the same time can be utilized into some of those more targeted type casts. So skip it under a dock, throw it into a laydown, that type of stuff. But a jig is a phenomenal springtime bait. Another one, so I mentioned before how a couple of these baits are more geared towards fishing specific targets. Well, you still need something to cover more water. And that's where I love to throw a floating worm. So this is just the Zoom trick worm. This is the yellow color. I also really like methylate. I like white. I like lime green. Any of your really bright colors are very good at covering a lot of water. So I'll actually throw this, you can throw it around all your objects still like you would a wacky rig. But if you're covering water and you're just going down banks, you can actually fish these really pretty quickly, cover a lot of water, and get the fish at least still to come out and look at it. But it's kind of my go-to moving bait, I guess. I don't really like to throw a lot of your standard moving baits when the fish are really up shallow. Your lipless baits, your swim jigs, your spinner baits. I just don't feel like I get the same interaction from the fish. I tend to feel like they would much rather eat a slower moving bait than a faster moving bait. I think a lot of that has to do with those fish aren't necessarily eating. They're really more about protecting that area that they're bedding in. They may not even have a bed yet. And I'm not talking about fish that are specifically on the bed, but the bass tend to get more territorial. So if they want to make a bed around a lay down tree, they tend to kind of get territorial around that lay down tree. So if I'm throwing a moving bait, those baits come out of the strike zone a lot faster than, say, your floating worm or a wacky rig. So from that standpoint, if I'm covering a lot of water or just trying to, try to figure out where the fish are at in a lake, maybe they're closer to the main lake, maybe they're way back in pockets. That's where I like to pick up a floating worm and really just kind of cover water, throw at targets, throw at everything in between targets, and just keep moving the boat at a pretty consistent pace. And a floating worm shines during that time period. The last one is the core tackle Ozark with a Berkley Maxent creature hog. I think this is a phenomenal pairing. I've caught a ton of fish on this. And the thing that I really like about the Ozark rig during the spawn is that when you pick up on this bait, it doesn't go vertical. It scoots along the bottom. And it's that quick scooting motion that generates a lot of those fish that are in and around the bed to strike that bait, because it's a much more natural movement. It's a quick movement, and it triggers that reaction strike out of the fish. So I really like to throw the Ozark rig around that time period. The other thing is this bait just really shines anytime you're fishing kind of shallower, more horizontal water, not real quick dropping water, but more of your horizontal flat type water, which as a whole is generally where bass prefer to spawn. So the Ozark rig in the springtime definitely shines. I mean, it's a year-round bait, but I really, really like it in the spring period. And that creature hog just creates a perfect crawfish presentation, and it just scoots so good along the bottom, and it gets a lot of really good bites. So those are 5 baits during the springtime period that I pretty much always have tied on, regardless of where I'm at in the country. If I'm down in Alabama, I'll have these on. If I'm up in Wisconsin, I have them on. It really doesn't matter that much. The fish pretty much universally will hit these baits during the springtime. So let me know in the comment section, what are some of your favorite go-to springtime baits? Color, everything. Throw it in the comment section so we can learn from you guys as well. Otherwise, if you enjoyed today's video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Stay tuned, new video coming out tomorrow.